Hello everyone and welcome to Women of Grace. I'm Johnette Benkovic. You've heard his songs, perhaps even danced to their beat, or maybe fallen in love in the midst of one. An original rock and roller, today's guest came out of the Bronx in the 60s and topped the charts throughout the country. But in his heart, he was a wanderer, trying to fill with music, drink, drugs, and the high life a place made only for God. And somehow, after drifting from church to church, he made his way back to his roots. And the wanderer came home to his Catholic faith, bringing with him his hard-won wisdom. This week, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Dion DiMucci will share with us his story of conversion and new life.
We are women of grace round the throne of the Lord Most High. And we lift up our praise from the depths of our souls here at Christ.
Today's guest had a tough upbringing. He lived in a tough neighborhood, was raised in a tough home, joined two tough gangs, and followed a tough lifestyle. But he became a star, a big one. In the music industry, he was golden, platinum in fact, and made a fortune by age 19. But like his song, he was a wanderer, trying to find his way. And he eventually did, right home to the Catholic Church. Let's welcome rock and roll legend Dion DiMucci, who tells his story in his brand new book, Dion the Wanderer Talks Truth. Dion, welcome to Women of Grace.
It's great to be here. Thank you, John.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to have you here with us on this set. And I have to tell you that, I was one of those who listened to your music and danced to their beat and fell in love listening to the words. You certainly have had an impact on not just my generation, but subsequent generations. And people know your music, and thank God you're still here and going strong.
Great to be here. God never ceases to amaze me.
I know, absolutely.
Never thought I'd be here.
Well, as we read your book, what I say in the open of the program is entirely true. You didn't have an easy life growing up, and I'd like to talk with you a little bit, if we could, about those early years in the Bronx. That particular part of your book captivated my attention. I feel like I know the people that you spoke about there.
I come to actually cherish my upbringing more and more as I move on, When I was a kid, I couldn't wait to get out, but it's amazing. I was talking to a friend of mine last night for hours about it. We were like, growing up on the streets, playing street games, on the stoop, and just challenging the guys and chinning and running around the neighborhood. I had it was almost like a community. It was like the neighborhood. It was like my community. I'd run home from school, throw the books on the table, have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, out the door for 4 hours, come home just flush because of schoolyard games and running up on the roofs. But I lived near Bronx Zoo, so by age 18 I saw every animal imaginable. I mean, how fortunate is that? But it was a tough neighborhood, and it had its great upside because there was a lot of love, a lot of just a lot of community. In my particular home, my father, there was some problems because my father had great qualities. I mean, he encouraged the mystery and wonder and awe of life in me. He just encouraged it by taking me to museums and explaining paintings, and he'd find wonder in the sky and the trees and the grass. He was like an emotional 13-year-old, but he didn't like to work. He would sculpt. He was like a kind of the original Tarzan. He'd dive off bridges. I mean, he was my hero in so many ways, but caused a lot of problems because my mom he was like an erring child, and she was like had an exaggerated sense of her own responsibility, but she worked hard, and Thank God she did. She kept the family together. But, you know, the rent was $36. That was a lot of money. And that, well, I don't know if it was a lot of money, but now that would be about $500. And they had to scrape for it every month, you know. So, but it had its upsides, and it was frustrating because of the arguing in the house.
Yeah.
You got to get a job, we have to pay the rent. I mean, every day, this was the theme, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, it's interesting because as you bring out so clearly, in that Italian American neighborhood that you grew up in, there were still a lot of the traditions that were held to the Italian ancestry, and you paint that so vividly. And you talk with us about a Monsignor, let's say it, Pernicone, right?
Monsignor Pernicone.
There you go, Pernicone, yeah. And he captivated me, and I just love the way in which he began to instill in you a desire to know a little bit more about the greater things. He wasn't going to let this young guy walking down the street get away with too much.
Well, my parents weren't religious. We didn't have any crosses or statues of Mary in the home or talk about church. And like I was saying, the more they argued, the better guitar player I became, because I got this hold of a guitar when I was 10 years old. But as I walked through the neighborhood, Mount Carmel Catholic Church was the hub of Little Italy, and you'd have to walk past it, you know, and it was, and you had reverence, and Monsignor would stand out on the steps. And he would challenge the guys. You know, I'd be walking by with Ralphie Moach and Joe BB Eyes and Frankie Yunk and, you know, all my friends. And he'd say, yo, you know, fellas, come over here. And they'd keep walking. But I'd turn, he would challenge me. And I found it interesting. Because, like, I'll give you an example. 1955, Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean. And of course, I'm walking by the church like King Rebel of the neighborhood, you know, with the red jacket and the collar up. And he says, "Yo, Dion, come over here." And he called me over. He says, "What's this Rebel Without a Cause?" You know, and I said, "It's a great movie, Monsignor." He said, "Dion, you got to rebel for the truth. Then you really got something. Remember that, Dion, the truth. You got to rebel for the truth. If you're going to rebel," and "Oh yeah, thanks for reminding me, Monsignor." And I walk down the street, and you know, I'd be walking, I'd be going, "What's truth? What is he talking about?" I didn't know what he was. But you know, the next time I'd walk by, I'd say, "Yo, Dion, come over here. What makes a man happy?" I'd say, "Oh, Monsignor, if I could get a date with this righteous fox who moved down from Vermont, Monsignor, she's so cute. She has red hair and green eyes. Her name is Susan. Oh, Monsignor, if I could get a Gibson guitar, J200, you know, these new guitars. If I could get a T-Bird, black leather bucket seats and wire chrome wheels, Monsignor, if I get a hit record, Monsignor, I'd be happy." "No, Dion, the virtuous man is a happy man. St. Thomas Aquinas." "Oh, thanks for reminding me." Okay. But I'd be walking and I'd say, "What's virtue? I don't, what is he talking about? What is virtue?" I didn't even know what it was. So I would turn back and say, "Monsignor, what's virtue?" That's all I had to say. And I remember it till this day. It's a habitual and firm disposition to do the good, you know. And he'd give me a whole story about it, you know.
Yeah.
But he was a saint. This guy, he put a special mass in the morning for the kids who like to play ball. You know, we'd have miss mass on Sunday. He put a special mass together for us early, right before the game. So I learned a lot from. I think he planted a lot of stuff in me that I didn't get from my parents. Although, you know, as I look back on it, I think I picked up the working ethic from my mother, and this wonder and awe and the mystery of life from my father, and this real underpinning truth from the Monsignor, you know, and maybe that's the reason why I'm sitting here, you know.
Yeah, it's a great mix, and what comes into my mind is the fact that this Monsignor had such a fatherly heart. He was a true pastor. He was out there with the flock, not separated from the flock, but right in the midst of Little Italy, you know, shouting out these questions to young guys walking by, prodding them to ask the deeper questions, you know.
Yeah.
And what a great opportunity that was for you. I want to ask you about this guitar that you got at age 10. How did you come upon a guitar at age 10?
My Uncle Lou kind of played Italian songs at weddings and stuff, and my mother was, I guess, walking by a pawn shop with him, and he had his eye. He said, "There's a great guitar in here for $8." Jonette, I can't tell you what that guitar is worth today. It was an L1 Gibson. It's in the book. At an early age when I got it. If I had it, I could retire.
No kidding. You don't have it.
But it was $8, and I heard Hank Williams on the radio, and I got really caught up into that. And what was the question now?
That was the question. How did you come by that that guitar?
Yeah,
you know, and you know, it was Hank Williams that captivated your imagination. Do you remember the song you heard?
Well, I heard Honky Tonk. That was the first song I heard, Honky Tonk Blues. I remember it so well. Because I remember the smells in the kitchen, the sauce, the gravy, you know.
Yeah.
And I heard, "Hey, I left my home down on the rural route. Told my pa I was going stepping out and leave these honky tonk blues." What's? Because I was used to this Italian music in my neighborhood, you know. What's honky tonk? Then he did jambalaya, and what's jambalaya? And I just got so enthralled with this stuff. It got me on the road to, the amazing thing about Hank Williams, he had, I don't know what you call it, like a sidebar personality. He called himself Luke the Drifter, and he would do these recitation songs that would teach about life. And like the pictures from life's other side, you know, in the world's mighty gallery of pictures hang the scenes that are painted from life. They hang scenes of love and of passion. They hang pictures of peace and of strife. They hang pictures of youth and of beauty, of old age and the blushing young bride. They all hang on the wall, but the saddest of all are the pictures from life's other side. Oh, the pictures from life's other. And he would tell these stories. And I would learn about life by listening to this guy. I was just caught up in this thing as a kid, you know. And it's a funny thing. I think I learned, maybe I couldn't define it, but I learned at a very early age that in a 3-minute song, you could resolve conflict or take people on a trip, really give them a nugget of truth, or it would take you somewhere from here to here, you know. And you could start out with something very frustrating, like you know, I started writing songs, here I am, girl, standing in the rain, going round inside this hurricane, baby. You know, I'm like, you know, they're like, don't you understand exactly how I feel? My mind feels like it ain't got no driving wheel, baby. You know, and you go on. And then, like, the last verse would be, everybody's got to make a change sometime. My heart has turned towards the sunshine, baby. I want to ride with you, you know, and you'd go on like, so you could resolve conflict within 3 minutes. It was like a mini movie. Yeah. So I got this, like I said, maybe I couldn't define it at that age, but I could sit on the stoop in Bronx, New York City, and my friends would gather around. They'd say, sing that song again, you know, the pictures from life's other side, or, you know, that's, you know, and I'd sing these songs. I could take these guys on a trip, and they weren't threatened by a song.
Yeah. But
to talk about some of this stuff would threaten them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you could sing, I'm lonely, no one knows what I go through, but to talk about it, they go, what's wrong with you, you know?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it seems to me, you know, without drawing too much out of what you're saying here, that when you live in a situation where, you know, things seem to be rather unresolved, it's got to be semi-comforting to be able to come up with a 3-minute narrative where everything works out at the end.
Do you know, that's the whole point of the book, too. The book has 20 chapters of vignettes, and each chapter kind of ends off with a taste of transcendence and a glimpse of salvation.
Yeah.
It takes you to higher ground. I've been on the planet a while. I've learned some things through my experiences, and you put yourself in a situation, circumstance, or a condition, and it resolves with that, like, just higher ground.
That's right, that's right. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about that higher ground, Dion. And friends, Father Ed Sylvia is going to be with us, so stay tuned.
I'm a wanderer, yeah, a wanderer. I roam around, 'cause I'm a wanderer, yeah, a wanderer. I roam around, 'cause I'm a wanderer, yeah, a wanderer. I roam around,
Welcome back, friends. Our saint this week is St. Francis of Assisi, the great troubadour of God. St. Francis of Assisi had another nickname during his early years that had nothing to do with holiness. His friends called him King of Feasts because of his great love for partying. The son of a wealthy merchant, Francis traveled with a bevy of young nobles to every party in town. And just like them, he dreamed of a life of chivalry. In pursuit of that dream, he eventually joined the Crusades under the leadership of a great military hero named Count Walter of Brienne. Surely the Count would lead him to fame and glory, but it wasn't to be. Francis rode off to battle in a resplendent new suit of armor, but never made it farther than a day's ride from Assisi. There he heard God speak to him, asking, "Who do you think can best reward you, the master or the servant?" Francis soon realized the servant was Count Walter and that his master was Jesus Christ. He turned his horse around and returned home. Although it would take several more years before Francis came to understand what God really wanted of him, he eventually turned his back on all material wealth to devote himself to a total embrace of the gospel, a call which is carried out to this day in the order that shares his name, the Franciscans. St. Francis, pray for us. We're also pleased to have with us on our set Father Edmund Sylvia. As you know, he is our theological advisor, he's our chaplain, he is our co-host. Welcome, Father.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Here's an interesting little note. You know, we select these saints prior to coming up, and it wasn't until we were in conversation, Dion, that I realized that your baptismal name is Francis, right? And so here we are with this saint, and we selected this saint because I was looking for a troubadour who would kind of match the endeavor that you've been on for all of these years. And you know, in this bio of St. Francis, I see a whole lot of Dion DiMucci in there.
Wow.
I
What
sure
can I
do.
say? I thought I only looked like him from the back. If I take the hat off, I'll show you what I mean.
But he went through the same kind of a situation. Troubadour,
Yeah.
party kind of guy, you know, hears this call of God, and it has a major impact on his life. And that's your story, isn't it?
You know, St. Francis, he's kind of was a hero in my neighborhood. I don't know why, because it was Mount Carmel Catholic Church that was the hub of the neighborhood, and the little cathedral in the midst of my neighborhood, and that's a Carmelite.
Sure.
I'm
Sure.
wondering why St. Francis was so popular, but, you know.
Well, he was Italian. His mama made pasta.
Well,
Sure did.
my parents tried to baptize me Dion, and they said, well, you can't, he needs a saint's name. So my granddad was Frank, and my mom's name is Francis, and St. Francis was big in my neighborhood, I guess because he was Italian, right?
Yeah.
And so I took his name. I'm It's a good name.
It's a
Amen.
very good name. You know, Father, as we listen to Dion's story, you know, and we, some of us can reach back into the 50s,
yes.
you know, and I can remember some of those years very vividly. Some of them I was too young for, but the world was very, very different at that time. You know,
Right.
the world was very different. And when we hear about the struggles that young people were beginning to experience then, sociologically, things were really changing.
Big time. Remember post-war and all that entailed. Remember, Second World War, of course, really brought the Depression to its end. But, you know, with so many people affected by the war, returning, all of the problems that brought in terms of employment, all of this, the urban reality, you know, the whole suburban thing had not yet kind of blossomed. That would come in the years to follow. But the kind of neighborhood that Dion grew up in was a very common urban experience. Didn't have to be New York City, as big as that is, you know. It got played out in industrial cities like the one I grew up in, et cetera. You had your Portuguese neighborhood, you had your French-Canadian neighborhood, you had your Polish neighborhood, those kinds of realities. But what you drew attention to in terms of that sense of neighborhood was a phenomena that many people mourn the loss of today. You know, when really, even though things were hard, financially hard, relationships in terms of parenting, etc., there was this sense of a bigger community caring for people, involved in their lives to some degree. And certainly Monsignor, you know, in an exemplary way, took his fatherhood seriously, knowing that in some way, I'm sure, he was making up for what wasn't present, you know, by parents who were busy having to scrape in order to put food on the table, pay the rent.
And what, you know, I think you bring out, Dion, is that so much of that activity was in the streets. You know, as you state for us, you know, people were out of the houses, they were in the streets, there was a lot of interaction going on, and there was a whole life outside of the home that was happening. What was that like, you know, for you and for your friends? You named some of them. Everybody had a nickname in those days, you know, that was the thing to do. And you ran with tough group of kids.
Well, we got in a lot of trouble, you know, but because I was kind of like a juvenile delinquent. I had a lot of angst. I didn't know why I was, you know. But, you know, like you say, there was, you know, I could run out of my house and run over to my friend's house or the butcher shop or the grocer who knew the 400, maybe 500 families that he served in the neighborhood. He knew who went into the army, who got married, whose baby was on the way. He knew the neighborhood. The grocer, he just intimately, like he knew the people that walked in. He was like the grocer was emotional if you wanted to order a sandwich. I mean, I'd say, give me American cheese with muttatelle, which is an Italian kind of cold cut, on white bread. You're going to ruin my sandwich with American cheese and white bread? You're going to ruin the muttatelle? Oh, what would you suggest, Joe? Well, put some nice provolone on it. So you put the provolone. I'd say, hey, give me some mustard. On this, you want Maria, and Maria will come out from the curtains, and she had the peppers, and she put the peppers on. Then he wouldn't put white bread on. He said, you got to use a little, you know, he'd take out the little, you know, Italian loaf of bread, and he'd put it, and then he'd put all the cold cuts like hanging outside the bread. And while he was collecting my, you know, taking the change that I put on the counter, I put all the cold cuts back into the bread. He said, what are you doing? And the meat's got to hit your mouth first, then the bread, then the peppers, and you're going to drink that Yoo-hoo with my sandwich? You don't drink Yoo-hoos. I mean, I was like, Joe, hang the sandwich up on that. It was like Picasso, this guy. But I mean, that's how like close people were in those days.
Right,
you know?
yeah, exactly. Well, and many of these characters found their way into your songs. I mean, I don't think the butcher, the sandwich guy found his way, but some of these characters began to people your songs in different ways as you continued to write about what was happening.
Well, you know, in a neighborhood like that, there's characters bigger than life, you know, that deserve a song.
Yeah.
You know, The Wanderer is typical, you know, because it was written about a guy named Jackie Burns who used to have this swagger and move down the street, and he had tattoos all over him, and every time he dated a girl, he'd get another tattoo, and, you know, he had Rosie on his chest, and he was like the man, you know, like, and in my neighborhood, it was a funny thing because it was all about reputation and respect. It had nothing to do with character. We didn't even know how to spell the word. So, but a guy like that, and you know, The Wanderer, you know, it was a very popular song for me. And in the 50s, everything had to be like, you know, fun, you know, I'm not that big guy. It was like a a rock thing. But it was a darker song than it seems to be, because in the middle of the song it says, I roam from town to town, I go through life without a care, I'm as happy as a clown with my 2 fists of iron, but I'm going nowhere. And it really turns in on itself, and the guy has like a moment of clarity. He kind of sees himself, you know, and he's wondering where he's going. So the song is a little darker than it, you know.
Oh yes.
And it was exactly that kind of an experience and that kind of thought process in your own life that would start you down a path that at some given point in time would kind of swing back all the way to Monsignor and Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church and all that he taught you as you walked down that street, and he hurled out his questions that you were gracious enough to come back and answer so that you could begin to hear the truth he wanted to express. And friends, as we continue through the course of our week, Dion's going to continue to share his story with us, and I want to thank you for being with us today, Dion.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Father Ed. And we want to get the book out to you, friends. It's right here, Dion the Wanderer. We've got it. Bye-bye now.